Welcome, good morning, and good afternoon, everyone. We're so excited that you've been able to join us today for our session on coaching in a work-from-home world. My name is Lauren Pragoff. I'm Vice President for Effortless Experience here at Challenger. My team works daily with our clients to implement Effortless Experience best practices, both for frontline customer service reps, as well as coaching skills for supervisors. So very excited to be here with you all today. I'm joined by two fabulous colleagues, Doug Ferreira and Scott Rothman. I'll let them introduce themselves, and then we'll get into a little bit of background on our research and our opinion around coaching, and then hopefully what will be a lot of very valuable and tactical advice for you and your teams as you think about driving effective coaching while we're all working from home.
So my name is Doug Ferreira, and excited to be here with all of you. I am a master facilitator and coach with the Effortless Experience team. So I have the pleasure of working with senior leaders, with managers, with customer service professionals, helping them figure out how to execute on the effortless experience with their customers. So very excited to be here with all of you.
And I'm Scott Rothman. I'm a director here with the Effortless Experience team, running the revenue team. And like Lauren and Doug, super excited to be here with everyone. I want to start today's session with what I think is the baseline finding for any coaching conversation I'm going to have. Long story short, while there are a number of drivers of rep performance, it turns out that coaching is the best performance lever out there. Now, on the surface, this finding may not be all that surprising to most of us on the line, the idea that coaching is an important lever. But let's be precise, because what I find is surprising to most is that coaching is the top driver of rep performance. What's even more surprising, well, the fact that coaching is likely doing more harm than good. On the left-hand side, what we're seeing is that poor coaching hinders performance twice as much as good coaching improves performance. Compounding the challenge, only about 22% of supervisors out there practice good coaching to begin with. What that means is that I am working with 10 supervisors. What I'm telling you is that 8 of you, you've got some work to do. On the right hand, oh, go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, one of the things I just wanted to add on to that, Scott, and I apologize for jumping in.
Go ahead.
But we talk about how damaging that poor coaching is that you were just hitting on, and I think we should recognize that in today's work from home environment, that's even more so, right? I mean, it's these folks are remote. We don't get to see them every day. And if you look at the research on the right-hand side of the screen, it talks a little bit about, disengagement of staff, right? So I want to make sure my staff is engaged, they're productive, they're efficient, they're working hard, right? And so I think that even just reinforces your point around how important it is to make sure that we're really engaging in good, effective coaching.
Yeah, key call outs here on the right-hand side, right? The impact of poor coaching, disengagement, right? Disengagement, huge issue, especially in this environment. And then degrading of performance. Two things, obviously, we want to avoid. And Doug, you've been running these classes for us virtually the last few months, so you are seeing this firsthand. But I think that's a good segue maybe into what good looks like. So let's talk a little bit more about that. All right, it's a system, if you will, of integrated and scheduled coaching. On the right-hand side, we've got our scheduled coaching, and it's what most of us are used to at this point, right? It's the one-on-ones off the floor. Hey, fix that, fix this. Here's your dashboard. Here are the red, yellow, greens, right? That's our typical coaching conversation. Most organizations spend about 55% of their time on this type of conversation, when in reality, as we see the bottom right, we should be spending about 25% of our time on this type of conversation. And oh, by the way, the conversation should actually be shifting as well. So I was alluding to this, hey, fix that, fix this, here are your reds, here are your yellows, here are your greens. But as you can see on the right-hand side, we're calling out, this should be a conversation or a handshake on development. Let's use this time during our one-on-ones to find the one or two things that we're going to focus on in the coming week or 2 weeks. And so we have something to come back to, something finite, something tangible to come back to when we regroup a week or two later. Now, most organizations stop right there. But when you are a low effort organization, you also incorporate the second part of the system, which is the integrated coaching piece over on the left-hand side of the page. And as you can see here, 75% of our time should be spent on this type of coaching. And we call it integrated coaching. Some people call it side by side, but the gist of it is that after we're having that handshake on development conversation during the one-on-one, we're going to back that up by, well, at least in the olden days, if you will, Doug and Lauren, sitting down with our staff and plugging in and listening to their conversations, right? Walking the floor, randomly sitting down and sitting down and listening so we can reinforce certain behaviors or correct certain behaviors.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
Scott,
Lauren,
so I would point out that the 75-25 split of time is not necessarily just our opinion. It's actually based on the research that we
Right.
did, and we studied hundreds and hundreds of supervisors and their coaching practices and habits to really better get a sense of who was driving the right type of performance, the biggest performance gains from their teams. And what we found is that profile of supervisor, those people who were getting the biggest gains in their team's performance, were spending almost 75%. It was 74 point something, 75% of their coaching time in that integrated coaching conversation. And it doesn't mean that scheduled coaching conversation is less important. It just means that we do it less frequently. And that we're really focused on that learning interaction, that integrated coaching that's in the moment. And I think as we've spoken with a lot of our clients over the last 6 months or so, this is where people start to struggle in the work from home environment. Because when you're remote, when you're not able to sit down side by side, and we've heard it referred to as knee to knee, elbow to elbow, shoulder to shoulder, all of which is not socially distanced. It's harder to do that when we're all working remotely, or we can't be close together like we used to be able to do. And so all of a sudden, these two forms of coaching actually start to look more alike than not alike. Because at the end of the day, you may actually have to start scheduling those integrated coaching moments. And that's okay. The point though is that these are two different types of conversation. So even if integrated coaching isn't spontaneous, it's still very different than the scheduled coaching.
But fair statement to say that we need both of these components, right, to drive the true impact of coaching.
Absolutely.
I think that's a good segue into the next page, which is really the brass tacks. Lauren referenced a good point, which is those numbers came from all the research that we've done over the past 10, 12 years. In addition to all the research we've performed, we're continuing to have calls daily with reps, supervisors, leaders in the contact center and customer service. And we've been able to gather a collection of what we're calling FAQs. And you can see that we're coming at it from two perspectives. On the left-hand side, we've got supervisor FAQs. And then on the right-hand side, we've got the leadership FAQs. Lauren, you just started addressing the first bullet point for supervisors. Doug, I know you've got some specific thoughts here as well.
Yeah, I think one of the things I loved about what Lauren said was kind of differentiating, between the scheduled coaching and the integrated coaching, how in a work from home environment, they might start to look a little bit alike. I might have, more scheduling of my integrated coaching. But here's one thing we should reinforce and remember is that, good coaching behaviors are good coaching behaviors. That means I need to make sure that I avoid going into tell mode, feedback mode. Hey, here's what I just observed. Here's what I would recommend you do differently in the future, right? Or, hey, here's a trend I've been seeing. We need to get this corrected, right? That's not coaching. Coaching is, hey, what are some skills that you want to focus on? What are you observing? How did that call go? What's your reaction to that call? How could you, improve in the future? What would you do differently if you had to do it over again, right? It's those coaching behaviors that are about asking questions, striving towards self-assessment, self-discovery, self-learning, self-improvement, as opposed to giving the answers and giving the feedback. And so, I just wanted to make sure that we remembered that what's not different in a work from home environment is, coaching and what coaching is and those coaching behaviors, right? So I just wanted to make sure that we hit on that as well.
No, that's fantastic. And actually, again, I think maybe a good segue into the second one, because I literally just got this question yesterday, which is, hey, I love this idea of sitting side by side and doing this integrated piece, but hey, we're not in the office. We're not going to be in the office anytime soon. So how do you practice integrated coaching when you can't actually sit next to someone, right? How do you do this spontaneously? Lauren, I know you've got some feelings here.
Yeah, and as I alluded to earlier, I think that one of the most important things to do is actually to schedule it. So make sure that you are blocking time in your schedule as a leader, as a manager, to dial into some calls, but also give your rep the heads up that, hey, I'm going to listen to some calls and then we're going to pull up and have an integrated coaching conversation. So be ready for that, to know that, I'm going to listen to your next 5 calls, 10 calls, whatever it is, depending on your environment, how long your calls last. And then we're going to pull up, we're going to debrief, and we're going to have that integrated coaching conversation, which again is going to relate back to the skills that we agreed we're going to be working on, those goals coming out of the scheduled session. So yeah, it is a little less spontaneous in that way, but it's still in the moment related to those calls that we just listened to.
And if I could just build on that for a moment, just really quickly, I'm sorry, Scott, but I think,
No.
what you just hit on, Lauren, is absolutely, really, it's critical. If I'm a customer service professional, I'm the coachee, right? And my coach, arrives, dials in, connects, etc. And I don't know exactly what the purpose of this is and what we're trying to accomplish and exactly what he or she is looking for me to do. If I'm not, bought in on all of that, that creates confusion. It creates discomfort. There's that awkward, situation. So we have to really clearly communicate and define in the mind of the folks that we're working with, hey, this is a coaching session, right? This is about helping you get better. And it might be different than some of the other reasons that we're sitting in and listening in on calls. So we have to be very purposeful and clear in our communications about what we're trying to accomplish.
I want to build on both of your comments. I'm going to skip the third bullet point. I want to run to the fourth. We'll come back to the third, because it was, you can imagine there are people on the line going, well, if this is supposed to be spontaneous, and Lauren, you reference, hey, look, let your rep know. So if we let our reps know that we're going to do this spontaneous coaching, aren't they just going to be on their best behavior? Aren't they just going to do their best possible?
Possibly. And that's not entirely a bad thing, right? At a minimum, you just helped a couple of customers have better experiences than if your rep wasn't on their best behavior. And to be fair, this happens in the live environment as well. They know when you're sitting next to each other. So unless you're doing 100% remote secret listening, this is probably happening. And that's okay, because it helps your reps kind of level up, right? Like, I'm being watched, I'm going to try my hardest. And guess what happens? They start building habits around doing the right skills, doing the things that you want them to display during those conversations.
Yeah, and if I could, once again, such great comments from Lauren that make me think of other things. So if I could just add to that, I think this is also why it's so important for us to make sure that we've established a good, strong, trusting, safe environment, culture, relationship between coach and coachee, right? So if I'm afraid to have my manager listening in on my call, or if I feel under pressure to perform at a certain level, then yeah, first of all, I'm trying to do everything I can to be perfect, but that could actually cause a lot of problems, right? And so I think if we've created an environment of trust between coach and coachee, so that they feel like it's okay for them to struggle a little bit, right? I'm working on a skill. I'm trying to develop that skill. And that might mean I'm not perfect at that skill, and that's okay, right? And I think if we've established that relationship between coach and coachee, then I'm not under so much pressure to be perfect every single time.
Mm.
I think the other thing too is, again, like when manager sits down with direct report, when coach sits down with coachee, the coachee should know what that skill is that we're working on. So I'm working on active listening, for example. And so I know that going in, right? It's not a surprise. So when we start having conversations about active listening, I'm not wondering where is this coming from. It's a skill that we've established ahead of time that we are working on together. So I do think there's a lot of things that we can establish ahead of time that create this culture, this safe environment where I can be comfortable, maybe not doing my best on every single call, not because I'm not trying hard, but because I'm developing that skill.
Now, as we've been having more and more conversations around how to run integrated coaching in this virtual environment, I think that the common granular question that pops up is that third bullet point, which is, do I need some sort of technology to do this? It sounds like I might need it. I don't think I have it.
Yeah.
Laura, I see you nodding your head.
Yeah, so I think honestly, nothing fancy. So we actually just finished a survey of customer service leaders asking some questions related to managing through COVID and returning to the office, but also a lot of questions around coaching in a remote environment. 100% of people said that they are using video as their primary tool for coaching. We would definitely say, like, that's probably all you need, really, at the end of the day. It's great to have that face-to-face. It's important to continue to make those connections that you just can't sometimes get when it's a voice-to-voice conversation. It's much easier to multitask and to be distracted when the video is off. So we would encourage you to have your video on when you're having coaching conversations. Interestingly, however, somebody brought up a question to us recently about communication styles and whether or not video was a good idea for all communication styles. And for those of you who aren't familiar, in our coaching program, we teach this idea of flexing your communication style to the person that you are coaching. So for example, I might naturally be more inclined to get into detail and talk about process and lay things out in a linear, step-by-step way, versus a person I'm coaching might prefer to be, a little bit more expressive, to learn through stories or by doing a role play, being in the spotlight, that sort of thing. And so it's important that you flex your style to meet someone else's. And so in that context, you may actually find that certain communication styles get really exhausted by video conferencing. And it's important to know that, to be aware of it. I wouldn't say that it kind of earns you a ticket out of any video conferencing, but just to be aware that yeah, you may actually have to differ your approach based on somebody's communication style.
It's an interesting point. I think we are either starting to hear it or see articles about this sort of Zoom fatigue, if you will, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I've been doing 10 calls, all week long. I'm doing this one without my video. I want to throw one other thing on here that isn't on this list, but it's time, right? And there's long been this coaching urban legend, if you will, that coaching only happens, it's a time issue. It's a quantity issue. And we hear it all the time. I don't have the time for it. I don't have the time for it. And we're hearing it a bit more, even, more so in this environment where you've got people who are working from home and they've got their kids and their family and everything going on at home that they didn't have to deal with beforehand. And I just want to throw out there that, yes, absolutely, times are crazy and hectic and busy, but good coaching doesn't actually require more time. In fact, when you look at the research we performed, we know that high-performing teams actually spend less time on coaching than your typical team does, because it's more of a quality focus and a quantity focus. And so I just want to throw that out there for folks who are on the phone as well, because I know that's been popping up more and more as well. Shifting to the leadership FAQs really quickly, I think a common question that we are hearing from leaders is that first one. how do I know if coaching is even happening in this remote environment? Doug, I'm going to come to you. You're in the classroom. You're running our virtual instructor-led training classes. You're meeting with some of these leaders in those classes. What are you hearing?
Yeah. So two things come to my mind. Number one is one way to know that good coaching is happening within your organization is to actually do good coaching as well, right? So when we have senior leaders that are coaching their direct reports, and those direct reports are modeling good coaching behaviors with their direct reports, it kind of flows down and we create a coaching culture. And so if I'm a senior leader, and I am coaching one of my directors, for example, I could be asking them questions like, how are your coaching conversations going? What are you working on right now? What are you finding success with and what's challenging to you? So in other words, modeling these good coaching behaviors and coaching the coaches, if you will. So I think that's one way that we know. I think the other way is to just ask questions of the coachees and listen very carefully for what you hear. So questions like, hey, are you getting a lot of coaching? And if they say, yes, I'm getting a lot of coaching, great. What does that coaching sound like? What does conversations sound like? And just listening and making sure that what you're hearing are examples of coaching and not examples of performance management. So I think those are a couple things that kind of pop into my mind when I think about how senior leaders can ensure that this is happening.
Yeah, I love that idea of modeling the behavior that you want others to be doing. So we definitely agree with that one, Doug. And another thing that we're hearing from our clients has to do with actually putting a coaching code into your workforce management platform. And even two, maybe, right? One for integrated coaching, one for scheduled coaching, so that reps can put themselves into coaching mode when they're having that integrated coaching following a call. And then obviously that's a very quantitative way to know whether or not it's happening. It may not get to the next question though, in terms of how well it's happening.
And I to the how well it's happening. This is the question. I'm flipping the script here a bit because this is the question that we are asking organizations, right? So when we're talking to senior leaders and we're talking about coaching in this environment, we hear things like, I feel like my staff have the skills to do this. I feel like there's the willingness to do it. Yes, time aside, chaos aside, et cetera. And I say, well, great. How do you know it's going well? And I'll tell you, I haven't heard a good response just yet. There's sort of well, I'm relying on my managers. I'm crossing my fingers. Doug, I see you nodding your head there.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some certainly some measurements or metrics we could look at, right? We talked about engagement, we talked about satisfaction, we talked about all kinds of different metrics that should improve if coaching is going well. But I also think it's again, using our ears, and really listening and asking questions and hearing from our folks and from the members of our team. Have we created a culture where coaching can thrive? Have we created a culture where people are willing to learn, where they're willing to be vulnerable, where they're willing to engage in that coaching conversation? So I think using your ears becomes incredibly important.
Yeah. I mentioned earlier that we just finished a survey of service leaders asking some questions around coaching, among other things. One of the questions that we asked was, how successful do you think your supervisors are right now in that remote coaching environment? A full 25% said not well, which at first it's like, okay, well, great. That means 75% said, yes, it is going well. And that is good news for sure. But it means 1 in 4 are struggling, which means 1 in 4 of your reps are struggling because they're not getting the good coaching. And as we earlier discussed, that bad coaching is actively hurting their performance. So all of a sudden that 25% seems a little alarming, actually.
And so one of the things we might recommend is, as we get into this third bullet point, right, shadow these remote coaching, right? I mean, hey, put yourself in their shoes, right? So Lauren, talk to us a little bit more about how these leaders can shadow these remote coaching sessions.
Yeah, so similar to how you would do it live, right? Like, yes, it takes a little bit of pre-planning. You need to coordinate the schedules, make sure that you have set aside that time and the supervisor and the rep both know you're coming. But it's the same sort of shadowing that you would do live. It may feel awkward at first if you haven't been doing this type of shadowing previously. It will get better, I promise, right? The more that people are used to it, they get more comfortable with it, both you, the supervisor, and the rep. I think it's really important when you are shadowing a coaching interaction to remember that you are the shadow, right? You're the fly on the wall. You're not there to actually solve the problem or provide feedback to the supervisor in the moment in front of the rep, right? So you're really there, you're listening, you're very attuned to what's happening. Your video should be on, right? So you're not multitasking, but you are a passive participant in that interaction. And then you're having the debrief and giving the feedback and the coaching to the supervisor.
Yeah, that tendency to jump in and say, oh, but, right? I mean, we see it all the time where it's sort of if you just do it like this, right, is definitely a huge issue we see across the board. I know we're coming up on time here. I want to be respectful of everyone's calendars. Let's do this. Obviously, there's so much more we could probably get to. We wanted to highlight the key points that we're hearing either in the classroom or in our conversations with supervisors and leaders when it comes to coaching. Let's bring up Lauren. If I could ask Lauren to bring up your contact information. So should there be any additional questions that pop up as soon as we disconnect here or that we didn't get to, please feel free to email Lauren, email the Effortless box. Otherwise, we'll let you get on with the rest of your exciting day. Thanks so much for joining us today. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Lauren. We look forward to hearing from everybody and anybody about coaching. Take care. Stay well. Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Take care.